Hey, what it do, guys? This X Factor 27 coming back to you guys again today. Today we're gonna be reacting to another video by Russell and Andy, and it's about the career of Chelsea Green. I know I butchered it. I can't do it like Samantha Irvin, but it's her whole career from where she started in wrestling to where she is now. So it's very funny that he put out a video on her, man, because she did a lot of good stuff in the Royal Rumble, man. A lot of funny stuff for real. So she's had an up and down career, but she's our first ever United States champion. So you guys sit back, relax, and watch this video with me.
Can be hard to pull off in wrestling. But in recent years, one performer has really been able to crack the code by giving us some truly funny moments, and in the process, turning herself into a cult sensation. But of course, WWE's resident Karen's career goes a lot further than just her comedy antics. No, she's also a well-seasoned all-rounder in the world of wrestling. But how did she get to this point? Well, join us today as we take a deep dive into her entire career journey so far in Hot Mess, the Chelsea Green story. Chelsea Ann Green was born on April 4th, 1991 in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada, and it was there that she developed an interest in wrestling. In fact, she found something of an idol in WWE star Kelly Kelly during her teen years, with it being the former Divas champion who inspired Green to become a wrestler herself. So it was that, after graduating school, Chelsea decided to start training in the ways of the ring, and this soon led to her finding work on her local Canadian indie circuit, where she'd go under the original ring name of Jada. What were some of the places Jada honed her craft after having her first match in 2014? Well, Elite Canadian Championship Wrestling for one. And so impressive would she be there, she'd soon catch the eye of WWE, with this being exactly why she'd be brought in to do a cameo performance on the August 11th, 2014 episode of Raw, where she'd play a physical therapist named Megan Miller. Who was Megan Miller exactly? Well, she was the woman that the Authority had paid off to claim she was having an affair with Daniel Bryan.
Oh,
Needless to say then, this was
I didn't know that. I never noticed that. That's crazy. Small freaking world, man. Small freaking world.
only a short-lived role, but it would be enough to earn Green some notice backstage, and that led to her being selected as a contestant for season 6 of the relaunched version of Tough Enough in 2015. How would Chelsea do on this show? Pretty well, as it happened. In fact, she'd make it all the way to the final 4 on the female side of the equation. That said, this would not be enough to earn her a contract with the company quite yet. No, for now, she'd have to return to the indie circuit, waiting for that next big opportunity to come along. Luckily for her, though, that opportunity was going to come sooner than she realized, because after taking note of her work, Rossy Agawa, founder and then booker of World Wonder Ring Stardom, the #1 all-women's wrestling promotion in the world, decided she was exactly what he was looking for. So it was then that in 2016, just 2 years into her career, Green would then get to do a tour with Stardom. Unfortunately for her, though, this would have to be cut short when she broke her collarbone during a match, putting her on the injury shelf for a while. Not that this would be the end of her time in Stardom for good, though. No, once she healed up, the Canadian would be invited back again, and it would be here that she'd finally get to properly mix it up with some of the best female talent out there. And come 2017, she'd return to America with a lot more experience, this time to wrestle for Queen of Combat. That's right, this was not the same Chelsea Green who had been in her home continent before. No, now she was ready to win some gold. And some gold is what she would soon win when, on February 18th of that year, she teamed with Taylor Hendricks to become the inaugural QOC Tag Team Champions. And this was far from all she was doing stateside by now, because by that point she'd also managed to score a job with TNA. Yes, now going by the ring name of Laurel Van Ness, the British Columbian was fast rising up the ranks of the Knockouts division as well. But then it was hard for her not.
Yeah, I do remember her in TNA. I really liked that gimmick a lot, like the makeup and all that stuff. That crowd was crazy.
To be a fast riser at this point, as the character she'd created for herself in TNA was an instant winner and one which perfectly played into her comedic talents. What did it involve exactly? Well, it involved her presenting herself as the Hot Mess, a maniacal girl who constantly looked like she'd just come back from 4 nights of non-stop partying after having been left at the altar by her kayfabe fiancé, Braxton Sutter. That's right, after her on-screen lover dumped her for Allie, Laurel Van Ness apparently lost her mind and gave up on ever changing her clothes, which was exactly why she was now always adorned in a torn-up wedding dress with messy, disheveled hair and makeup, usually with a half-empty wine bottle in her hand to boot. Obviously then, it's easy to see why fans took to this gimmick as it was so out there and so fun to watch. And it allowed Chelsea to get a lot of extra screen time she likely wouldn't have gotten otherwise. Hell, so much screen time would she get now, she'd regularly find herself in matches against the likes of Madison Rayne, Allie, and Rosemary, all while, in segments surrounding her bouts, her new kayfabe single status would see her getting courted by people such as Scottish star Grado. Of course, in reality, however, Green was far from single. No, by this point, she'd begun dating Matt Cardona, and that would later blossom into marriage.
Yeah, I remember that too, man, when they first started dating for real. I remember during the early parts of like wrestling news and stuff like that, and I found out these two was dating. I said that was a match made in heaven, man, because they fit perfectly together, man. I tell you. So shout out to them, man. They still happily married today, and hopefully we see Matt in WWE again, if he wants to come back. So
before this happened, however, Van Ness would turn babyface for the first time in the Impact Zone when, on the August 24th, 2017 episode of Impact, she'd come out to the ring, now all cleaned up for the first time in months, all with the intention of finally accepting Grado's advances. In fact, she wasn't just ready to date Grado, no, she was ready to marry him, and this was why she went as far as to propose here. Sadly for her though, while Grado would initially accept this proposal, once he found out she was Canadian and as a result would not be able to get him an American green card through marriage, he called the whole thing off, leading to Laurel losing her mind all over again and reverting back to being the hot mess fans had by then come to know and love her as. That said, despite fans' fondness of her antics by now, Van Ness would technically be the heel in this situation. And this meant when she screwed Grado out of a victory during a Monsters Ball match at that November's Bound for Glory pay-per-view, it was positioned as a villainous move. And this also meant that when she went on to enter a tournament for the then vacant Knockouts Championship, she'd usually be put up against babyfaces on her side of the bracket. Not that such a thing would slow her down, however. No, by the time all was said and done, it would be the Canadian holding up the Knockouts title for her own after she beat Rosemary in the finals. And after that, now a singles champ for the first time in her career, Laurel would go on to defend her newly won gold against opponents such as Kiera Hogan. Interestingly though, while becoming a champion would usually be seen as a positive for someone's career, this presented something of a problem for Green because, prior to winning it, she was intending to request her release from TNA as she believed WWE were interested in signing her up to a contract. Now that she was a champion, however, TNA bosses did not want to let her go, and this meant any WWE debut would have to be delayed as she first completed her time there, with this all finishing with her dropping the gold to Allie on January 15th, 2018. That said, it wouldn't be straight to WWE at this point. No, there would still be a few more months delay before they would bring her in. Luckily for Chelsea though, this would give her ample time to further build up a reputation for herself as a talent to watch by not only appearing in Season 4 of Lucha Underground under the name of Reclusa, but also by showing up at the first All-In event in September of that year, where she was part of a four-way bout between Britt Baker, Madison Rayne, and Tessa Blanchard.
I did not know that. And I watched the first All-In. Dang, I tell you, small word. That shows I wasn't paying attention back then. Dang, I didn't know that though, and I didn't know she was in Lucha Underground either, man. Oh man, that's funny. I remember Jack Swagger, Ricochet was his hang self now, and I didn't know she was in that though. Small world, very good knowledge. I did not know that.
After that though, it would be WWE all the way. Yes, following an official tryout in August, Green would be signed up to a contract and brought into the Performance Center in October to start learning the style. And this was something she apparently took to like a duck to water because by the end of that month, she'd be appearing at live NXT events, now under her real name once more, though regaining the hot mess character of Laurel Van Ness. But alas, if she thought this was going to be her big breakthrough moment, she was wrong, because as it happened, fate had other plans. And those plans involved her breaking her wrist during her first TV match in March of 2019, something which put her on the shelf for the next 3 months. Obviously then, when she finally returned in June, much of her steam had been lost, and this meant she'd do little of note for the rest of the year, with the only real thing she did throughout the remainder of 2019 in fact being a cameo appearance on an episode of Raw, where she did a job to Charlotte Flair. Still, there was always 2020, a year that, as it was beginning, Chelsea hoped was going to represent the real start of her WWE career. As we would all soon find out, however, 2020 would end up being one of the worst years in recorded history for everyone. And this would be no less true for Green, because after starting out strong by appearing in the Women's Royal Rumble match on January 26th, and then following that up by beating Shotzi Blackheart on the March 4th episode of Raw to earn herself a spot in a ladder match to determine the #1 contendership of the NXT Women's title, things would start to fall apart for the Canadian. That's right, just as the world was crumbling, Chelsea Green would see any creative plans that were being made for her fall apart when mass furloughing and firings at the WWE offices happened.
Yeah, 2020 was, like you said, Andy said, it was just an awful year for everybody, man. So it kind of sucks because a lot of plans and stuff really got scrapped for real because of COVID for real. And with her not having no creative works and stuff like that, that kind of made her lose a lot of her momentum and stuff like that. So, and I hate that because I remember watching NXT and seeing her in the Royal Rumble, and she was getting to making a little buzz for herself for real. I was kind of rooting for her even back then for real, for real. Like I feel like she should have won the NXT championship, women's championship, but that's just my honest opinion. But when COVID happened, that derailed a lot of stuff with a lot of wrestlers for real, for real. And that led to certain things she's probably not here.
Hell, prior to this, one of the plans for her had been for her to be called up to Raw, but instead, she'd have to sit on the sidelines again for a while, waiting all the way until November of that year before she was finally given another opportunity to appear on TV, this time as part of the SmackDown roster. Sadly though, this would not lead to another big breakout moment for the former Knockouts champion. No, instead, fate would play cruel tricks on her once more, as while taking part in a fatal four-way match with Liv Morgan, Natalya, and Tamina on the November 13th episode of the Blue Brand, Chelsea would break her wrist again, with this necessitating the planned finish of her coming out victorious having to be changed on the fly, as she instead lost to Morgan. And this all sadly led to April 15th, 2021, where after months of inactivity, she'd be released from her contract as part of another wave of releases. Still, while this...
And I hate, that was like she probably thought that was the worst thing that happened to her career, but like Cody Rhodes, like Drew McIntyre, and like so many others, go in the indies, build yourself back up, and become a brand new person. Well, not a brand new person, but a more reinvented person. And the sky's the limit. Like, it may seem bad at the moment, but that's the thing about wrestling. You can always go to the indies and continue to develop your craft over and over and over again to make yourself better. So that's exactly what she did. You guys can see it right here.
This was bad news. It wasn't all negative for Chelsea, because after a few months, she'd joined Ring of Honor. That's right, it was on July 11th of this year that she made a surprise appearance at ROH's Best in the World pay-per-view as a commentator. And the reason she was only a commentator here and not in the ring was because, even this many months on, she still hadn't been cleared by doctors to return to the ring yet. No, that wouldn't happen until a week later on July 17th when she made her triumphant return to TNA, albeit now under her real name. What would she do in the Impact Zone this time around? Well, she'd start out by doing an intergender tag team match with her by then fiancé Matt Cardona, as the pair took on and defeated both Brian Myers and Tennille Dashwood. And after that was over, Green would continue to make a splash by entering into a tournament to become the inaugural digital media champion. Unfortunately for her though, despite making it all the way to the finals of this tournament, in the end, Chelsea would fall to the might of Jordynne Grace, as she instead took the title away for herself. Still, even if she wasn't a champion, things were still looking up for the girl from Victoria, as on New Year's Eve 2021, she and Matt Cardona would finally tie the knot in a ceremony held in Las Vegas. And now that she was a married woman, she was ready to make 2022 her year, as she vowed to rule the roost in TNA. How would she go about doing this? Well, she'd start by entering the Knockouts Ultimate X match at January 8th's Hard to Kill pay-per-view. And while she wouldn't win this, her performance would be enough to remind people why she was one of the top prospects in that division. And this wouldn't be all Chelsea was doing to make a name for herself at that time. No, she'd also refresh her character again when, along with her new husband, she'd turn heel on the March 24th episode of Impact by laying out Mickie James. And after that, she'd add even more associates to her ranks when she aligned herself with her real-life best friend Deonna Purrazzo, as the two became known as Vexed. How would Vexed fare as a duo? Pretty well, as it happened, because on the July 21st episode of Impact, in their first official match together, they'd be able to make short work of Jordynne Grace and Mia Yim. And following that, they'd keep the momentum going by not only challenging, but defeating Rosemary and Taya Valkyrie to become the Knockouts World Tag Team Champions. Sure, they would lose those titles to the Death Dolls just 1 month later, so it wouldn't exactly be a long reign or anything, but the only reason this had happened was because Chelsea was about to journey on towards ventures new once more. Yes, despite her last run in WWE not going to plan, by 2023 she would be brought back into the fold. So it was then that after doing the honors to Mickie James on the November 11th, 2022 episode of Impact, Green would say her goodbyes to that promotion and would ready herself to return to WWE. How would her run in the WWE go this time around? Great, thankfully, as on January 28, 2023, she'd make an immediate splash by entering the Women's Royal Rumble match. Sure, she may have been eliminated very quickly here by Rhea Ripley. Hell, she only lasted for 5 seconds before she was sent packing, in fact, but
Yeah, she got eliminated real quick, but nobody beat Santino Marella, who I'm beefing with in my SmackDown vs. Raw 2010 playthrough. So you guys go check that out if you guys want to check that out. So first episode is up. But yeah, she didn't last long, but I remember her making her return because I was watching TNA during that time, and I knew about Vez and her with Matt Cardona and her feud with Mickie James and all that stuff. So I knew how talented Chelsea was, man, and I'm glad she finally getting recognition she deserves.
this wasn't a burial of her. Rather, it was a way of introducing her new character, that of WWE's resident Karen. That's right, no longer was Chelsea Green a hot mess. Now she was somebody whose favorite thing to do in the world was speak to the manager. And this new role, a largely comedic one, will allow her to bring the laughs over the months which followed. Of course, as with most comedy characters though, the expectation was that this one would have a relatively short shelf life. But so good was she in the role, she was able to give it more legs than anyone else could have. And this became evident early on when, despite often being put in positions seemingly set up for her to fail, Chelsea would succeed. No, this wouldn't lead to fans gravitating toward her right away. In fact, during her early months when she was teaming up with Sonya Deville to do things like challenge for the WWE Women's Tag Team titles at WrestleMania 39, few in the audience paid her much mind at all. But by the time the summer of 2023 came around, people were forced to start taking notice of her, as that was when, following them being drafted over to Raw, Green and Deville would earn another shot at the gold, and this time when they challenged the champions, Liv Morgan and Raquel Rodriguez, on the July 17th episode of Raw, they'd win that gold, with this adding yet another accolade to the ever-growing list of Chelsea. And Chelsea Green gave these belts a whole new boost of life during her run with them, not because she was presented as a world beater or anything, but because she used all of her talents to make the segments which involved them entertaining. Even when a spanner got thrown in the works of the title run when Sonya Deville suffered a legitimate ACL tear early on into it, Green would make it work by demanding to Raw General Manager Adam Pearce, in her typical Karen manner, that she be able to hold on to both belts by herself. And when this request was refused, she then set about finding a new tag team partner, something which eventually she found, or which found her to be more precise, when another Scottish performer entered her orbit. That's right, this was the point that an unlikely alliance formed between Chelsea Green and Piper Niven. And while it may have seemed like a weird mix to have these two work together at first, it came across great on TV. But it wouldn't just be tag team action that the Canadian would be taking part in by then. No, as the autumn of 2023 rolled around and WWE finally started to recognize what they had in her as a female Santino Marella of sorts, she was given more and more singles bouts, with one of the most notable of these being her trick or street fight against Natalya on the October 30th episode of Raw, where her Halloween costume for the evening was of fellow Canadian legend Bret Hitman Hart. Yes, it's true that when she took part in these singles matches, Chelsea was usually on the losing end of things, as that was still her role, even if she was starting to get more over by the week. But the wins would come for her in the tag team division anyway, the division where she still held the top gold with Piper Niven, so it wasn't as if she was too upset about this. That was until the December 18th, 2023 episode of Raw came around, and in what was the worst Christmas present possible for her, Green would team up with Niven to take on the challenge of Kaden Carter and Katana Chance, with it being here that Carter and Chance defeated the heels and took away their tag team titles from them, ending their reign at 126 days. How would Chelsea bounce back from this as 2024 began? Well, she'd start out by demanding a rematch against the new champions on the January 8th episode of Raw, but when this rematch saw her and Piper Niven fail to regain the titles, it was clear she was going to have to move on to a whole new venture. Yes, the Victoria native would head into the 2024 Women's Royal Rumble ready to prove to the world just how good she was by winning the whole thing. Unfortunately, though, her attempts to win the Rumble didn't go so well. No, while she would last for a full 17 minutes here, a much better showing than her previous 5-second run in 2023, in the end, Chelsea would find herself being thrown over the top rope by Becky Lynch and forced to watch as someone else gained that ever elusive wrestle.
But she was very over in that Royal Rumble, guys. She was getting Chelsea chance and everything, kind of like what she was getting at this past Royal Rumble as well, man. So she may be kind of like a female Santina Morella, but she's really good, man, at her character and in the ring. So she don't get the flowers she really deserves, but she's the first ever Women's United States champion. So I feel like she's finally getting some of that more favor that she rightfully deserves. So
Mania World title shot. That said, the main roster wasn't the only place which had world titles. No, there was also NXT, and so this was why, after being drafted back over to SmackDown a couple of months later, Green would use the period that the draft window was open to make a quick pit stop down on the developmental brand. And while there, she'd be sure to stake her claim to the gold by challenging then NXT Women's Champion Roxanne Perez. Sadly, however, the prodigy would prove to be too much for the heel when the two finally met in the ring one-on-one during the May 7th episode of NXT. So, forced to try and bounce back again, Chelsea would return to the main roster where she called her shot and entered herself into the Women's Money in the Bank ladder match at the titular PLE on July 6th. And while she wouldn't win this one, the crowd reaction she got that night in her home country of Canada, despite still being a heel, was a sign of just how much of a cult following she'd gained by this point, all on account of how entertaining she was with any material she was given. Would these reactions continue for her as the weeks and months went on? Yes, as there was a general sense by now that Chelsea Green had something going on and that WWE needed to capitalize on it. And that would eventually happen for her in November of 2024, as this was the point that WWE announced they were going to be introducing main roster women's mid-card titles, namely a women's Intercontinental title for Raw and a women's United States Championship for SmackDown. So with Chelsea being a part of the Blue Brands roster again by this point, her next steps seemed clear: become the inaugural Women's United States Champion. Of course, at that point, many fans assumed the first champion would be someone like Bayley or Bianca Belair, but to the surprise of those fans, it would actually be Chelsea Green who ultimately held this title around her waist at Saturday night's main event on December 14th, after winning a tournament which saw her beat not only both of those women, but also Blair Davenport and Michin too. Yes, after all this time, the British Columbian was a singles champion again. And now she was a singles champion on the big stage of WWE. Where will she go from here? Well, the sky's the limit, because with a whole new year ahead of her and gold around her waist once more, she's never felt more important. Maybe she'll go on a lengthy reign with this new mid-card belt now, helping to establish it as an important one in the company's hierarchy. Or maybe her time with it will be short, and once it's done, she'll move on to bigger fish like the world title. Whatever she does, we're sure it'll be interesting, because whether she's a Karen or not, Chelsea Green has now proven herself to be one of the great women's wrestlers of her generation.
yep. Well, that's the end of the video, guys. Shout out to Russell with Andy for the video, but yeah, she really deserves everything she gets, man. So I'm very proud of her, but that's all. Like, comment, subscribe if you guys want to, and y'all have a good day. It's Factor out.